And it's an overused phrase, isn't it, these days, breaking news. But in the moments that have passed since I told you 6 unmarked police cars appeared to have arrived at the King's estate in Norfolk, Sandringham, where his disgraced younger brother, Andrew Windsor, currently resides. In those moments, he has reportedly been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. That, at the moment, is all anybody knows. But it is, in the context of events, dear boy, events, it's a cataclysmic moment for the royal family, and because the royal family is so intrinsic to this country, intrinsic to both perceptions of and constitutional and unconstitutional realities of, it's enormous. It's pretty close to unprecedented. In fact, it is unprecedented. The former Prince Andrew, the younger brother of the King, has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. This, of course, as a consequence of some of the revelations to recently emerge in the so-called Epstein files. But at first glance, and I don't know how many times this morning I'm going to have to remind you of 2 things. The first will be that Andrew Windsor denies all wrongdoing, and the second will be that this is all anybody knows at the moment, even though it's a developing story, breaking news. The only available facts can be contained within a single sentence. But you know that this is not about the girls and young women who feature in the Epstein files, sometimes in very close proximity to Andrew, both in photographs and in reportage, but about the possible or the alleged sharing of information, commercial information, to which he would have had access as a consequence of his curious role as a sort of make-believe trade envoy for the United Kingdom. And here we are. It's a moment of, I've never done anything like this before. When breaking news involves the royal family, it is normally, sadly, a death or a funeral, possibly the occasional marriage, but they never take us by surprise. Breaking news about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, as he calls himself at the moment, being arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. And I have to be honest with you, this is live radio, and there's no earthly way that anything else of comparable importance is going to occur in the next hour, and I might just repeat myself until then. Obvious responses include, I bet he's sweating now, as about 30 people have already texted me. And I was going to ask you, and I suspect I still will, but if you didn't have an answer lined up before this event, before this moment, then I suspect you've probably got one lined up now. I was talking to Eleanor before we came on air. I'm obsessed with the Clapham Omnibus. Younger listeners won't know what that involves. The Clapham Omnibus is a sort of byword for public conversation. Will the man on the Clapham Omnibus care? Or will the man on the Clapham Omnibus be talking about this? It's very much of the age in which the phrase was coined, because, of course, most people don't travel by bus these days, and it could just as likely be a woman. But that was the phrase, the man on the Clapham Omnibus. And they're the subjects that what's the word that I want? They're the subjects that I simultaneously love and hate the most. The subjects about which we just don't know how deep the public interest is. Until this point, I'd been saying in pre-programme conversations, I just have this weird sense that something else has to happen before the gravity of the situation will become clear, will properly crystallise. There is always denial of any wrongdoing, and it still may, of course, turn out that Andrew Windsor has no case to answer on this, the question of why he would pay £12 million to a young woman accusing him of rape when there was absolutely no wrongdoing is a question that, of course, only him and his family could answer. But the idea of not knowing, nobody knows. It's like my old geography teacher. You remember? Don't know, don't need to know, nobody knows. Nobody knows. Nobody can actually measure, even in the days of the internet. I could probably have a word with the online team and they would tell me what is currently gathering most of your interest, what is attracting most of your interest. But that doesn't necessarily translate into conversations. It doesn't necessarily translate into questions I can ask you and you can ring in to answer. But the idea that this is no longer enormous disappeared 8 minutes ago. The idea, the argument, the opinion that this is just another who cares about the royal family? The idea that this is not an existential threat to the actual monarchy. Would you go that far? That's probably going to be the phone-in. This is one of those rare moments where you can hear the programme take shape in my brain exactly as the words emerge from my mouth in an even more fresh and entirely unplanned way than normal. But this is the moment. 9 minutes ago this morning, on the 66th birthday of Andrew Windsor, the monarchy came under, I would argue, greater pressure than it has at any point since the death in Paris of Diana, Princess of Wales, and the hideously inadequate response of her estranged family. Not to mention, of course, the brutal treatment of her sons, particularly the youngest, compelled to walk like a lost boy behind that coffin in an attempt to shore up the public relations of much older members of the family who had failed signally to recognise the public mood. This is a story of an altogether different order. This is an entirely different moment, but in the context of pressure brought to bear upon the palace, in the context of this question, how much trouble is the palace in at the moment? I would argue possibly more than it has ever been in before. 10 minutes after 10 is the time. As part of the investigation, a statement from Thames Valley Police, we have today arrested a man in his 60s from Norfolk on suspicion of misconduct in public office and are carrying out searches at addresses in Berkshire and Norfolk. The man remains in police custody at this time. We will not be naming the arrested man as per national guidance. Please also remember that the case is now active. This is for you as well, and for me, by the way, not just the statement that's been issued by Thames Valley Police. Please also remember that this case is now active, so care should be taken with any publication to avoid being in contempt of court. Assistant Chief Constable Oliver Wright said, following a thorough assessment, we have now opened an investigation into this allegation of misconduct in public office. It is important that we protect the integrity and objectivity of our investigation as we work with our partners to investigate this alleged offence. We understand the significant public interest in this case, and we will provide updates at the appropriate time. And the Press Association confirming that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office, Thames Valley Police said. So, with the constant caveats that will run through at least the first hour of this programme, like Blackpool through a stick of rock, he denies all wrongdoing and no further details are known. I think we can still ask the question of how much trouble the royal family is currently in. I was poised to ask it before this story broke. I was poised to ask it, actually, because I record that little snippet that goes out towards the end of Nick's show, about 2 minutes before you hear it. So I was asking you how far up the family tree these problems, perceived and now actual, will reach before we knew that Andrew Windsor had been arrested this morning on suspicion of misconduct in public office. So the phrase I used was, how far up the family tree does this reach? I think we can simplify it still further now, can't we? The King's brother is currently under arrest, facing allegations of misconduct in public office. Will this affect the monarchy? 0345 6060 973. How much trouble is the institution of the monarchy and, of course, the current monarch actually in? Remember the very, very slow process of stripping him of the various baubles and titles in which he has rejoiced for his entire life, some of which, of course, bestowed upon him for unspecified services to the public weal. What, I wonder, is the first reaction that you have to this story? Just the very first reaction. Mine is just wow. Can't really articulate much beyond a sort of sense of extraordinary events unfolding in real time right under our very noses. So we have to be cognizant of contempt of court. We have to be cognizant of repeated denials of any wrongdoing, and we have to be cognizant of a paucity of any further detail or further fact. But this is what we know. The Duke of York, as he was until incredibly recently, is under arrest on suspicion of misconduct in public office. This is a radio phone-in programme, and at moments like this, I have little more to ask you than how you respond to this moment, how you respond to this breaking news story. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. The man who was, for most of his life, second in line to the throne, or for much of his life, second in line to the throne of this country, is currently under police arrest. And I want to know, A, what you think it means for the monarchy, a question that I don't think has carried this level of weight since Diana, Princess of Wales, passed away, and crucially, the royal family acted with almost unbelievable incompetence and callousness in the immediate aftermath of that tragedy. So that's question number one. What does it mean for the monarchy in general? How far up the family tree do you think this is going to reach? And your first reaction to this story, your first response, what is it that you find yourself thinking that you've never thought before, because we are in a moment the likes of which we have never seen? And let me clarify that, if I may, very briefly. It is not a question about whether you think we should have a royal family. It's not a question about whether or not you think the monarchy is an anachronism or republicanism is a hideous force. It is a simple reflection of how the country we all love and grew up in, well, not all of us grew up here, some of us haven't grown up at all, but it is a simple reflection of how our country is constructed. Our population is a pyramid. And at the very top of that pyramid, for good or for ill, this is not an opinion, it's counting, at the very top of that pyramid sits the royal family. It is a monarchical institution that has barely changed since 1066. It underpins almost every level of our society. Some of the great injustices of our age can still be traced back to the institution of monarchy as imposed upon this country by William the Conqueror. The ownership of lands, the ownership of huge swathes of our islands goes back to the divvying up undertaken, to get my numbers slightly wrong, give or take 1,000 years ago, by the monarch. And that institution, I think, uniquely and incredibly has sustained in its current form for hundreds of years, since they chopped off Charles I's head, or at least since his son Charles II returned to the throne. Things have barely changed. And I think today, and I'm always a little bit allergic to hyperbole, because when you're live on air and you're in the middle of a moment, there's a tendency to think, wow, this is huge. And then you're on your bus home later today and you think, well, actually, it wasn't that huge at all. I don't think it gets much bigger than this, of course, short of the events that often follow arrests. But, of course, and crucially, not always. So how far up the family tree do you think this already reaches?